under the 5-minute rule.
Good morning, ladies, and thank you for being here to address such an incredibly important issue. Ms. Herridge, I'd like to start with you. About 2 months ago, you were held in contempt and levied daily fines of $800 per day for your refusal to disclose your sources. This is deeply concerning, and what's more concerning, you are not the first. In an article related to your case, the Washington Post reported how in 2005, 5 national reporters were held in contempt and levied fines of $500 per day. And in 2008, a USA Today reporter was held in contempt and faced daily fines of $5,000. All of these instances where reporters upheld their journalistic integrity and protected their sources to ensure good reporting for the American people, only to face rebuke and heavy-handed enforcement by the courts, which are intended to protect the First Amendment. Ms. Herridge, how fundamental to reporting is the protection of your sources?
Congresswoman, I have not lost a night's sleep about my decision to protect my confidential sources. That is the core of who I am as a journalist. I am facing contempt fines because I am upholding the most basic principle of journalism. If you cannot offer a source a promise of confidentiality as a journalist, your toolbox is empty. No whistleblower is coming forward, no government official with evidence of misconduct or corruption. And what that means is that it interrupts the free flow of information to the public. And as we all recognized, journalism is about an informed electorate, which is the bedrock of our democracy. If you had asked me 37 years ago when I started working that I would be in the federal courts living a legal nightmare to protect my sources, I would never have believed it. I told you a story about my son. I'd like to finish it. At the end of the conversation, he said, "Mom, you do what it takes. I've got your back." And I thought, if a teenager understands how sacred this pledge is for every journalist, certainly Congress can pass the Press Act and codify these guarantees that will prevent cases like mine in the future.
Thank you for that. Do you think that the heavy-handed nature of these fines is to compel quick disclosure of sources and not give reporters a choice, a similar choice the way that you've exercised yours?
Congressman, just ask yourself, how many journalists can withstand fines, in my case, of $800 a day? Mine's being stayed pending the appeal. In another case you cited, it was $5,000 a day. These fines are designed that you have to disclose your sources. You have to burn them. And in a marketplace where we have this explosion in independent journalism and smaller outfits, they cannot withstand these fines. They cannot mount a costly and vigorous legal defense of the First Amendment. That is why I think this is such a dangerous time and why the Press Act can codify these guarantees, and it can happen with a very strong, in fact, the strongest bipartisan message about the importance of the freedom of the press.
Well, it doesn't just apply in your industry. We have other agencies, and I think that it's a sign of a tyrannical government when we give them the ability to levy fines like this. And an example that I will use is that the EPA has the authority to levy fines of $59,000 a day. And they do so, and that's how they will force people into settlements and consent decrees, even if they are not necessarily guilty. But they cannot withstand the pressure that they bring to bear when you have a government that has that kind of authority. So I think that it applies in the First Amendment context with our journalists, but I think it's a bigger issue that we as Congress need to address across the board, because again, I will use the word, it results in tyranny when you give agencies or officials that kind of authority. One thing that has been mentioned is that 32 states and Washington, D.C. have shield laws. However, not all states do, and there is no federal shield law, as each of you have described. As seen in your case and the case of others, this has then resulted in the courts actually being enlisted to compel disclosure of your sources. In instances such as your case, what does a hostile court system do for the protection of a free press?
I think it presents another very significant challenge for journalism. As my colleague Cheryl Atkinson said, when you are working with a whistleblower or you're working with a government source who has access to real information, and what I mean is information that is so important to get to the public so they can make up their own minds, especially about controversial issues. If you can't offer that assurance, nobody's playing ball with you. And as a journalist, you are always asking yourself, I think, in the marketplace where we are today, what kind of assurances can I provide? Can I go to the mat for this person? I've always believed that I'm willing to go to the mat. I think I've shown that in this contempt case. But not everyone is going to be able to have that opportunity.
Well, I thank you. I thank you for your bravery. I thank you for what you've been willing to expose. And I thank you all for being willing to stand up to the tyranny that we're seeing in the attack on the First Amendment. It is critical for the freedom of every single person in this room. So thank you. And with that, I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady from Wyoming.